Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, How Cloud Services Can Help Your Business. This webinar will focus on cloud versus on-site solutions, cloud migration, and the benefits of moving to the cloud. My name is Cindy Snide, and I'm the Sales and Marketing Director here at Revolution Group, but today I'm going to be your MC. Just a little bit about Revolution Group to begin. We are a technology consulting firm in Westerville, Ohio, specializing in managed IT services, Salesforce consulting, and manufacturing ERP services. Our technology services division offers small to medium-sized businesses a full line of managed services from 24/7 help desk support to project work, account management, and virtual CIO expertise. The Salesforce Services Division provides innovative Salesforce CRM consulting, implementation, and integration solutions. Our comprehensive manufacturing ERP consulting services include system selection and implementation, optimization, integration, and application development. A few housekeeping items before we start the webinar. This webinar will be recorded and available on our website at www.revolutiongroup.com. The recording will also be emailed to you at the completion of this webinar, along with a 2-minute survey letting us know if you enjoyed the webinar and topic. We have allotted an hour for this webinar, and we will be answering questions at the end, but please feel free to submit your questions into the section labeled questions. You will notice in the handout section of your webinar, we have included a couple of documents you can share among your colleagues to help better understand the cloud. You can access these handouts by double-clicking the name of the handout. From there, they will download and you can open them and save them to your computer or print them out. Our speaker today, thank you for coming, Vince, is Vince McCullum, who has over 10 years of experience supporting service desk and infrastructure services for a wide range of businesses. Vince is currently the team lead of Revolution Group's Network Operating Center of Proactive Engineers. This team helps keep the customers up and running 365 days a year. Thanks very much for joining us, Vince, and I'll let you take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here and get to talk about this exciting topic. Cloud computing is a big buzzword in today's business markets. With the staggering amount of services being offered, it can be difficult to envision where your business can adopt and integrate these services efficiently. Today, we'd like to help clear the cloud on cloud computing to demonstrate the possibilities and capabilities of leveraging these services for your business. Whether or not it's just moving some or all of your computing services from your premise to the cloud, every business can benefit. Let's get started with an introduction to cloud computing. You can consider that everything on the internet is in the cloud. This includes accessing any internet service such as web browsing on MSN, personal email through Gmail, social media and Facebook or LinkedIn, and sharing files using Dropbox, which are all forms of accessing a cloud service. The buzz about cloud in the business world is the process of moving your local systems and services to a cloud service. When accessing any of these services, you may be thinking to yourself, how is this information being presented to me and where is it stored at? When you use the internet, you're connecting to another system managed by somebody else. That data that you are accessing is being hosted from that system or systems. Anywhere with an internet connection could be hosting a cloud service. Your business may even be considered part of the cloud if your customers connect to the systems at your business to retrieve information. It wasn't until recent years that it's become economically viable to move most, if not all, of your services to the cloud. With improvements to internet services and server hardware over the years, it's not only become viable, but it's now recommended. You can start moving services to the cloud at any time with a migration plan, which is important to establish cutovers for each service that you would want to migrate. Think of some services or applications that are only accessible at your office that you'd like to have access to from home or abroad. Now that we've had an introduction to cloud services, I'd like to dive into the types of cloud deployments that are out there. Earlier we mentioned how everything on the internet is cloud computing, along with the fact that the cloud is really connected to another system using the internet. Taking this a step further, anything that is not publicly available is considered a private cloud. This would classify every system that is not openly accessible from the internet. This includes all of your workstations and systems that are on-premise and not configured with public access, which is most likely everything. This is normal and necessary for effective security. Even looking at data center scenarios where a portion of your infrastructure is managed in another location, it can be looked at as a second private cloud. A similar scenario would be if you had systems at two different offices. There are typically private connections between those locations to keep it private. This service is called a VPN, or a virtual private network. If you have a VPN client on your computer, like a little lock for the Cisco or the Blue In for Sonic Wall, and there's some other services out there like Fortinet and other providers, these applications allow your computer to access your private cloud over the internet. The primary advantage with a private cloud is maintaining full control over your systems and may be necessary depending on the type of service you might want to migrate. Although my parents told me growing up, with great power comes great responsibility, and with the control comes maintenance and management for anything that would be inside of your private cloud. Moving on to the public cloud, this can be classified with systems that are always available from anywhere with an internet connection. It does not require access using any specialized software aside from the end-to-end application used for accessing that service. Moreover, many software vendors are offering or starting to offer web-based solutions for their products. These products include QuickBooks Online, Microsoft Office Online, and perhaps Great Plains or Microsoft Dynamics if you're familiar with those. This type of deployment is what businesses are constantly buzzing about, since it removes the need for maintenance and management that all private cloud items require. We move that responsibility to the provider, who will maintain the environment and services you need. This opens up availability for internal resources to work on other tasks or focus on the service itself instead of the systems that the service has to run on. The only sacrifice is no longer having full control over the system. However, leaving that responsibility with the provider is advantageous, since that will be their primary focus. When you do not have a service that needs to be available over the internet, email and websites are typical systems that have this requirement. You make changes to your network to allow access to only those systems. When this is done at or inside of your private cloud, we then have what's called a private cloud setup. A good example of this would be hosting a Microsoft Exchange server for your email services with the system located on-premise, but still available when you check your email on your phone or a web browser. In many scenarios, even with cloud deployments, there's usually a need for a hybrid setup. It all depends on the service being hosted, which is why it's better to look at each service instead of trying to adopt a holistic approach when migrating to the cloud. This develops a greater understanding of your business needs and may effectively map out technology requirements for your organization. The cloud is swiftly improving to offer everything. It won't be too long before we see public cloud options for every service that's out there. If you look in the handout section of the webinar, you'll find a handout for the differences between the private and public clouds for later reference. Now let's take a look at the types of services that you should consider moving to the cloud and what will most likely have to stick around. We briefly talked about developing a migration plan when discussing when to move to the cloud. When looking at how to approach migrating to the cloud, it's better to look at individual services and migrating each one. In some cases, moving most, if not all, services at the same time may be a daunting task that's not feasible for an internal team. Establishing a migration plan will reduce problems while providing an avenue to communicate with your staff effectively. That being said, let's take a look at many of the services that are great for migrating to the cloud. There are many application vendors that may offer a cloud platform. You can engage them to migrate that service or function to their hosted platform. If they don't, there are certainly ways to make it available as a cloud platform using remote applications via terminal services, which we'll talk a little bit more down the line. We see many benefits from migrating locally managed business applications, since many are not available outside of the office. Moving to a cloud platform allows accessibility anywhere. Additionally, many business applications use a database model for record management. These are typically ERP, CRM, and accounting systems. Even when these applications may be on-site, there are methods for storing the databases inside of the cloud. Availability is an extremely important aspect to any business. One of the major benefits of moving systems to the cloud is high availability and redundancy. Any system moved to a cloud platform would no longer be housed on-site, which would eliminate concerns of a disaster that may compromise both the local production and backup systems. Even in the event local systems are still necessary, although there is a place in the cloud for everything, there are many backup services that will host system backups and even the entire environment to recover from a disaster. Terminal services and virtual desktops are a popular method for maintaining a consistent user environment. They provide a scalable way for improving the user experience with centralized systems and resource management. Moving these types of services to the cloud allows global access and is not dependent on the local network being available. Right now, you're probably logged into your workstation using what we call domain credentials. With the buzz about cloud services, many providers are working with Microsoft to reduce headaches of remembering passwords for multiple systems. There's a feature for many services called single sign-on, which allows you to use the same Windows credentials for logging into your application or service. In many cases, this can be complicated to set up and may require what's called federation servers to pass your credentials through Microsoft to your provider. Moving to the cloud offers an opportunity to eliminate existing infrastructure, if this already exists, or provide new functionality with a specific Microsoft service called Azure AD Premium or Active Directory. This service integrates with your existing on-premise Active Directory for easy integration. It provides an easy method for using those same domain credentials that you have and are using right now to integrate with hundreds of application providers, whether the service is in the cloud or if it remains on site. I'll post a link in the chat at the end of this webinar for you to look at the partners that Microsoft Azure works with for single sign-on capabilities. This is still a growing service and is not mature enough to replace Active Directory on-premise, although it is constantly being developed and improved for us to reach that point in the future. Websites are a major function of cloud services as well, and they may be public or private. You're probably already hosting your primary company website through the company that designed it. Most of these companies partner with a cloud provider to host your website content and make it publicly available. While we might want to move everything to the cloud, there will always be a need to maintain some services on site. This includes your core infrastructure for wiring all of your systems to the internet. Some core infrastructure examples are your local networking equipment, such as firewalls and switches. Printers will also need to be maintained on site, although us IT professionals can't wait for the day when they aren't necessary as they are right now, because I'll tell you what, it takes a lot to maintain them. And as email and other services become more readily available, we can look at not having to file papers and manage so much physical stuff. Really looking forward to it. Fax machines are fortunately becoming a thing of the past, with email being accessible for everyone, but those will need to be maintained if you're using them right now. Labeling and barcode systems almost always have a physical presence to manage them. Although, in recent years, we are starting to see large companies like FedEx and UPS have web systems that tie into your barcode system. We may see this become a complete cloud solution in the future, but for right now, it's got to stay on site. Any access control systems would also need to be maintained on site. This includes your key fob access, security system, and camera solution. Although many of these services are managed over a VPN to allow remote management capabilities. So they might not be on the public cloud, but you can create a private cloud tunnel or use a VPN to be able to manage them. Last but not least, all of your end user equipment needs to be maintained on site as well. There are some awesome capabilities by using virtual desktops that can reduce your footprint from managing end user equipment by making every user workstation the same. This would be leveraging some of the other services that we have available to us to help reduce your on-site labor requirements. Let's take a look at why you should consider moving these services to the cloud and what kind of benefits are going to be gained through a cloud deployment. Cloud providers are challenged with the daunting task of maintaining services for hundreds to thousands of customers. They do this by working with multiple internet service providers to provide load balancing at the edge of their systems. With the incredible amount of bandwidth, most providers can support any amount of connections without degrading service worldwide. Talking about bandwidth, providers have the ability to offer much more bandwidth since it's shared across the environment. This is typically 5 to 10 times the amount of bandwidth provided to an office building suite, much like your current location. The amount of bandwidth provided does have varying costs and is something that can change the monthly costs depending on the type of service purchased and the provider in question. When building services, you're going to get the option to purchase exactly what you need to meet the performance demands of that service. This is a difficult process for any local administrator as there's always costs associated with upfront equipment purchasing. Lots of planning is involved in preparing the local infrastructure for growth that may not even be utilized. The alternative is buying exactly what you need for a new or upgraded service, but leads to unexpected costs. In a cloud infrastructure, you only buy what you need and upgrade or scale up and down as necessary. While local virtual infrastructures for your on-premise offer these types of features as well, you have to ensure that you have the hardware available to support it. You might also be supporting a failover system on-premise, which may never even be used or tested in a lot of cases. Providers are constantly upgrading their equipment and performing maintenance behind the scenes, which can lead to a constantly improved environment. Next to the performance benefits, we also gain a lot with regards to productivity. Your local IT staff no longer needs to maintain on-site equipment and may be productive on different projects. Replacing physical servers and maintaining a hardware lifecycle schedule no longer needs to be required. Cloud environments are also much more flexible. They offer options for regional placement of your systems. If your organization has sites all over the USA or globally in other countries, you'll want to try placing your systems in a region that's close to these locations or those locations, and you may even want to replicate your infrastructure between various regions for redundancy and high availability for those other sites. On-premise equipment is typically difficult to maintain at other locations without staffing each site or paying travel costs for your IT staff to go between locations. There's also something called MTTR. That is your mean time to recover. Those regional systems may take a long time to recover if they're on-premise and if the right resources aren't available. Speaking of MTTR, cloud provider backup systems are very flexible depending on the type of deployment. Restoring a version of the system is usually a breeze and may even be as quick as 1 to 5 minutes. You may be able to even have no downtime if enough redundancy is implemented in the environment. I'm pretty sure we've all experienced situations where internet or power has been out of the office, which is never fun. Other bad situations include air conditioning faults and power surges. Cloud infrastructures are built with incredible amounts of redundancy to ensure uptime. Some of these features include industrial-grade generators, power line conditioners, backup AC units, and a host of other preventative measures to ensure services are always up and running. Reliability is key in delivering effective cloud services and an important difference when comparing between on-premise and cloud capabilities. When comparing the cost to maintaining a local infrastructure and a cloud infrastructure, it can be extremely competitive. You'll no longer have to plan for capital expenses on hardware and save labor on equipment maintenance. You'll also save on power consumption from no longer having to power servers and keep them cool around the clock. In some cases, maintenance contracts for maintaining software services may also be absorbed if you're moving to a software as a service solution. It's easy to see why there's such a buzz about cloud computing with all the benefits associated, and it's only going to improve with time. We've talked a lot about what the cloud is, what's available, and how you can benefit from it. Let's take a look at the models for the different types of cloud services next to see how it can best service your organization. While none of them are right or wrong, it's all a matter of capabilities that the service requires. There are 3 cloud service models that apply to cloud migration scenarios. Let's dive in and discuss each one in more detail to picture where your organization's services may fit in. SaaS, or Software as a Service, is the easiest model for organizations as there is no need to have anyone on site to maintain the system. This is a model where the provider is going to take care of all aspects of the service, from management to endpoint delivery. The provider maintains, updates, and manages the hardware and the application. There will typically be someone in charge of the relationship with the provider to submit requests and make any changes to the service, although this may be everyone in the organization, depending on the type of service provided. In many cases, the provider allows anyone to submit support requests, which makes a big difference in receiving support since they will have a dedicated support team. Some of the disadvantages with SaaS solutions is that they tend to be more expensive. Granted, they are providing an end-to-end solution. Less control over changing the system is also another disadvantage, although this may be easily perceived as an advantage since it may only have one way to do it and prevents confusion. Unlike managing an on-premise solution, there are lots of different ways on how to host it, where you want to manage it, and the amount of people involved in making those decisions. Another problem is that customization is not always possible. It might be limited and sometimes requires development projects in order to mold the service to how your organization needs it. Some examples of SaaS solutions include Salesforce, Dropbox, and Office 365. And as we see here in the model on the screen, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more later too, SaaS up at the top is the easiest value to your end users. When we look at it from a support delivery model and them being able to obtain support, they can easily call and receive it, and you don't necessarily need to have someone on site to maintain it. And it also is the easiest for executives because you just call someone and they take care of all of your problems. You pretty much have everything taken care of with a phone call instead of necessarily having a lot of internal communications around solving a solution or making a decision. Next, I want to talk about Platform as a Service. Platform as a Service is the model that we hear the least about because it's mostly meant for organizations that need heavy development. It was envisioned with developers in mind. It takes away the need for managing the systems and infrastructure, but it paves the way for your developers to be able to customize a solution that is meant for your environment. It also removes the involvement for IT staff as the provider is going to manage everything except for the data in the application. So in some cases, it's great instead of trying to find a resource or a staff member that is an IT admin and a developer and a whole lot of other hats that you might need, you're focusing on just someone that has development skills and skill sets, and they might be technically deep in those skill sets to give you more, a wider breadth of capabilities for what they're developing. This is a great middle ground for providers that do not offer SaaS solutions when there are third-party development services. This will provide a SaaS-like service with more development options, so you might not even need to hire that internal developer as long as there's a company out there. The problem is, once again, talking about the need for development, is having to have that staff available to be able to manage it or that third-party provider. There are also typically provider limitations on development capabilities. There are limitations with development languages, platform availability, and possible network limitations depending on what type of service it is. Some examples for Platform as a Service include Microsoft Azure, Apprenda, AppScale, and Cloud Foundry. Last I want to talk about is Infrastructure as a Service. This is the best for cloud entry and gives you full control over your systems. It's the most basic amount of services offered, which also provides a cost savings. You're allowed full system management with no limitations and access to all of the systems at an operating system level. This gives an opportunity to move any system that you already have to a cloud environment, whether or not it's supported, since there are no limitations. Although I shouldn't say there isn't any limitation, the only limitations that you really see is if there's physical hardware requirements. So if there's a third-party add-in card that needs to be there, or if you're trying to tie it into another system that has a physical presence. Another big problem is managing licensing. If you were to have a solution or a service hosted on a system that is an infrastructure as a service, you would need to make sure that that license is a digital license and not like a physical USB key. The disadvantage to infrastructure as a service is that it does require more resources to manage your systems, although the physical management is no longer required. Typically, vendor and on-premise resources are required within your organization to help manage the communications between the service being delivered and the availability of that service, since you have full control over the system. Looking back at this image, we can see here how infrastructure as a service is the smallest window, because from an end user standpoint, there's not as much gained when comparing to a SaaS solution. SaaS gives you that full end-to-end delivery, and the provider takes care of pretty much everything you would need in it. Moving down the line with PaaS, you would see where you have to have a development team or a third-party vendor managing half of that service. And then with infrastructure as a service, you have the smallest window because you're going to have a lot more staff in order to still maintain it. But by saving on the capital investments for hardware, you can help streamline your budget and understand exactly what the cloud infrastructure is going to cost you moving forward. Kind of moving forward, I wanted to give you another perspective on this model. There are a lot of technical terms in this diagram. However, this is a great visual perspective of the different models in a very technical view. It shows the progression between a traditional IT setup all the way to a SaaS solution. Interestingly enough, the cost for traditional IT and SaaS is very competitive in most cases. Even with traditional IT, many of the services have upgrade costs, annual maintenance fees, and other associated upgrade or hardware costs that are no longer relevant when you move to a SaaS model. As the management progresses, there is a difference in control and management over systems like we discussed on the last slide. With all the buzz about the cloud, there is certainly a lot to talk about when it comes to securing your data and services.
Can you not move it?
Oops. My apologies. My computer loves to act on its own. With all the buzz about the cloud, there's certainly a lot to talk about when it comes to securing your data and services. There are different levels of cloud security that you'll need to be concerned about or think about when you're depending on the type of service model. More on-premise resource management will lead to more internal security policies and requires review and updates to those policies as the landscape changes. So if you think the more control that you have over your systems, the more that you'll be involved and have to be concerned about when it comes to information security. To talking about security, there's a certain level of trust that has to be handled and managed with your provider. And this is pretty much like any other service you use. You think about dry cleaning or getting your car worked on or even banking. You depend on those providers to have the necessary policies and controls in place with your money or your objects and your stuff. And it doesn't really change much with cloud security, although it certainly is important when it comes to your business and your data. A lot of companies and cloud providers are working on getting compliance certifications. It's still pretty new to the landscape as everybody's rushing to move to the cloud, but these ISO organizations are working on getting more certifications in place and available for cloud providers to be able to show their customers that they really care and concern about security. When choosing a cloud provider, there are many organizations that maintain these certifications and ISO standards to reduce concern for maintaining them. These certifications are hard to achieve and have an extensive requirement in order to obtain them. That being said, most providers may not have them. However, this is typically due to that extensive process. You'll typically see much larger providers have them, such as AWS, Amazon AWS, and Microsoft Azure. You can always review their website or call them to see what certifications they have achieved. Moreover, a lot of the larger offerings and these ISO controls were thought about and designed with infrastructure as a service in mind. Since they have converged systems between lots of different companies and organizations, there's more control at the organization level, and it's easier for cloud providers to obtain these kind of certifications. Having them leads to more security measures that ensure that organizations are not able to see other organizations' data and systems. The ISO 27001 is actually possible for any organization, including your own, but aligns well with the security policy needs for cloud providers. That being said, since cloud providers manage a large array of systems, there's a level of complexity which helps secure your systems while they're in the cloud. All of the physical hardware that they maintain looks very similar and wouldn't specifically be labeled to your organization. There are many internal controls that help separate development teams with hardware teams and management teams to where there isn't one person that's really going to have full control to your data. Depending on the type of service, in infrastructure as a service and platform as a service models, the organization controls administrative access to these systems. That puts responsibility back into your hands in making sure that you have the internal controls in place for securing your data. Regionally diverse providers also have options to spread systems across regions and reduce possible physical impacts. Hundreds of thousands of customer systems and data are managed in the same physical location if we're talking about one particular location for a provider. The precise location of your system would be nearly impossible to find. There is always a level of responsibility of your organization to ensure that administrative access is managed properly. That's probably the most important thing, is looking at your business and making sure that depending on the level of control you have, that you have all of the necessary processes in place. Most security incidents are internal, so it's always a good idea to ensure that you have effective access controls in place, no matter where those systems or data is stored. Next, I want to talk a little bit about what the future of cloud computing looks like. The landscape for cloud computing has already revolutionized the way businesses are managing their infrastructures. It's still growing at an incredible rate, and the best part of adopting it now is growing your environment with it. There are new services and systems that are being set up every day. One of their primary responsibility is maintaining the physical systems. As they reach end of life, they are automatically upgraded with new hardware integration at an incredible rate. More organizations moving to the cloud will automatically lead to improved infrastructures. Integration between systems is also being set up and improved. As I talked a little bit earlier about identity access management and Microsoft Azure Active Directory, Azure, almost every day is adding new companies and new services that you can do single sign-on services with, and much more software and application providers are updating and rewriting their software to make it integrate with other solutions. Ideally here, if you look at, you might have Dropbox storing all of your data, and you want to be able to plug that all of where your data or your cloud data is stored and be able to plug that into your ERP system. There are many, many new providers that are getting into this integration space every day. Furthermore, we're looking at getting increased SaaS offerings. As we saw with all of the benefits, as you saw earlier, there are a lot less management and responsibility for organizations that move to a SaaS offering, and these application vendors are losing out on a lot of business because they don't have a SaaS offering. They're forcing you to buy a server and keep it in-house and maintain it and have a team to manage and administrate it. Well, a lot of these companies are seeing what they're losing out on, and they're moving to these kind of offerings. It's going to be great once everything is in SaaS and you no longer have to maintain your local infrastructure. One great example of this is QuickBooks, who began offering a cloud platform probably about 5 years ago. Many of our customers have moved to their cloud services and love it. There's less administrative needs. They don't have to plan downtime or outage for being able to upgrade the software or worry when they need to migrate their data to another solution. Additionally, we see a lot of expanded region options. Earlier in our webinar, we talked about the flexibility that we can gain with the regional offerings that cloud providers have. As providers and offerings become more available, additional regions will follow suit. Furthermore, many of the large providers build near other cloud data centers to distribute load between those centers while providing a larger region scope, which allows for more fault tolerance. And last, we're going to see a lot of security enhancements as we move forward. We talked about how those certifications are pretty new and relatively have just been added to this space to protect cloud infrastructures. And as we advance and move forward, we're going to see a lot more adoption of those certifications and see those certifications improved over time. As with any system as well, once flaws are identified, they're going to become patched and improved. Once you put that responsibility over to the provider, that's what they're solely focused on versus, like maintaining your local IT solution, IT staff. If you have a local IT staff, not only are they responsible for maintaining all of your systems, making sure that everything's upgraded and patched, they also have to be responsible for new threats that are coming out here and trying to take care of your end users all at the same time. When you look at a cloud provider, they're much more focused on how the landscape is and how it's growing and how it's moving. For them, not only for them to be able to grow, but for them to make sure that they're providing the best kind of service available to you. And with that, I think we finished up a little bit early. I'd love, so you want to think about what's next, and feel free to reach out to us or your IT team locally to go over what your infrastructure currently looks like and how you might be able to move your services to a cloud platform. Following back up on it, it's always best to make sure you have a good plan, look at each service individually, and develop a migration path for each one of those things that you might see there. I'm very excited for the next few years because this is not only is it just booming, I'm really excited to see where the landscape goes and help companies migrate their infrastructures. It's really nice. Great.
Thanks, Vince. So I do have a few questions that came in during the presentation. If anyone else has any questions, please get them in right now so we can ask before the end of our time. I have just a few, though, that already have come in. Vince, the first one is, why would I not want to move to the cloud?
The reason you might not want to move to the cloud, I would see this in a large, depending on the sector, financial sectors, there's a lot of worries and concerns about moving to the cloud, and you might not be able to move depending on your financial regulations or requirements. There are a lot of policies out there that state or dictate where your data can be stored and how it can be managed. So I would look at if you're obligated under any of those kind of policies or regulations, that you're not jumping too far forward without making sure that your partners, vendors, and those practices aren't going to be affected.
Okay. Do I need to move all at once to the cloud, or could I move in phases?
I would absolutely recommend you move in phases. You can do a holistic approach, but when you do a holistic approach, you're almost asking for something to go wrong. I see in a lot of environments, and in my experience, there are integrations and systems that are working together, and it's easy to overlook those items when you're trying to move everything all at once. I would take the approach of looking at each service that's being delivered and developing a migration path or a migration plan for that service. And then if there's any problems or if there's any troubleshooting that might be required, you have time to focus and dedicate yourself to that issue or that problem.
Great. We have one more question here, but there's still time if anyone has any more questions. Is there an increased level of support needed to manage my company when I'm in the cloud?
That truly depends on the service. If you think about it, if we move to more of a SaaS platform, you're going to have the ability to let your users maintain their own support requests and reach out to the vendor specifically for it. And then there's going to be a lesser requirement on your IT team. In some scenarios, though, I do see to where there is usually a controller on site, or you would work with your IT staff to help manage that SaaS solution. Once you move down, if we go back to that, if we look back at that triangle reverse pyramid that I had earlier, you're going to look at the more internal staff is required, the further down you get on that pyramid.
Okay.
It's a good way to look at it.
Right, good. Well, that is all the questions that we have. So that will conclude our How Cloud Services Can Help Your Business webinar. Thank you everyone for attending, and we hope that you got some valuable information on how your company can start benefiting from cloud computing. Please don't hesitate to contact us here at Revolution Group, either call just into Revolution Group or call and ask for Vince himself for more information about this and any other of our services.
We'd be happy to chat.
That's great. Thanks, Vince, and thank you everyone, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.